All right. Welcome to the Rise Up podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Mitchell. And on the show, I do my best to help you rise up to your potential by taking everything that goes into losing weight, improving your health, improving the relationship with yourself, making it make sense, making it easier than it has been, and just really helping you, get out of your own way. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today. And I really want to just get things rolling. I'll save all the other stuff for later. But yeah, let's just jump right into it tonight, or today, I guess I should say, on the differences between fat loss and weight loss and how to prioritize fat loss. Because a lot of people I work with that, and I just kind of answer general questions for on the internet. There's a very huge misconception of what weight loss and fat loss are. They don't realize that they're not the same thing. A big thing I like to tell people is fat loss and weight loss are not synonymous, right? Again, this is a redundancy of saying they're not the same. Um, and it's mainly because we need to understand, or I want you to understand, this helped me understand what I need to do for my goals, help my clients understand what they need to be doing for their goals, and how to shift their perspective on what progress actually looks like. Because this can be game changing for a lot of people, especially those of you who have a tough relationship with the scale. So a lot of us in our heads, we look at our bodies, we look ourselves in the mirror, and we get in this headspace of like, I need to lose about 20 pounds to look a certain way. Um, and there's a big association or there's a big reason why this is the case, why people focus so much on numbers more than anything else. Our brain can more easily quantify um, physical data, right? Our biological survival response is to put things into groups, put things into categories, quantify them to better understand them. So for the person who doesn't necessarily understand body composition, how how our body changes that composition, it will first, because we don't understand it, it will go first to the numbers, and then a memory of when we liked or sometimes when we liked how our body looked, but we associate the look with the number more than anything else. So then we get kind of caught up in, I need to lose the 20 pounds to look better, right? But the reality is you can lose weight and look worse. And this is why we need to understand the difference between fat loss and weight loss, because you can lose weight pretty easily. I mean, if you're someone who's tracked your body weight relatively consistency, multiple times a week, you will notice that it fluctuates up and down. It's not always just a set number all the time, right? You will weigh heavier at the end of the day because you'll have water in your system, you have food in your system, right? And you'll oftentimes be the lightest at the beginning of the day because you don't have anything in your system to affect it, right? So because because our brain wants to quantify the physical changes, it may not always, when we're chasing weight loss, we may not want to be chasing weight loss, because this can, our body can change its weight, and very little change could happen on our body. So in order to understand this, right, we need, or in order to start understanding the trajectory or the focus that we want to give our body to prioritize fat loss specifically, to not only lose weight but prioritize the stuff that we don't want to see, right? Focus on improving body composition. We need to understand that we need to understand that our body's always listening to us, whether we're aware of it or not, right? And it's always been listening, right? Whatever you've been eating, whatever you've been doing for your exercise or lack of exercise, it's taking all of that stimulus and adapting. You're telling it to do what it's doing. You may not know that. No one's asking to gain weight. No one's asking to gain body fat a lot of the time, but we're telling our body that that's the most important thing, because it's only doing what we tell it to do. It doesn't change. And there's hormonal situations and balances that can affect. But again, we are the ones with either lack of activity, overabundance of certain types of calories, or overabundance in calories in general, that our body hears, and that's where body fat storage comes from, right? The only way to gain weight is to be in a calorie surplus, right? If you're gaining weight, you're eating in a surplus. Like, and it could be easier for you to be in a surplus if you're not very active, right? And if there's an overabundance of calories in our system and not a very very high stimulus of training, meaning like you're not telling your body that that surplus of energy needs to be stored in muscle, for example, then that energy that's being consumed in excess will be stored for later use, because body fat is a survival tool, right? But body fat, even though, we don't really need to, worry about starving a lot of times. I mean, that doesn't mean there's people that aren't starving, but body fat has evolved with us to be a emergency fund. If food is scarce, our body will have body fat to help it make it through that tough time until it can get food again. So our body's automatic response to an overabundance of food is for that survival purpose, is like, okay, just in case, right? Just in case, I'm going to keep you alive, because our body's number one goal is to keep us alive. That's it. It just cares about keeping us alive. It doesn't care about our happiness, doesn't care about our weight. It just cares about whatever the stimulus that's going on, surviving the stimulus and being prepared for the worst case scenario. Because that's why we've adapted and evolved the way that we have. We're not the most apex predator on the planet, right? I mean, kind of technically we are, but we're not just the strongest or the fastest. We're the most adaptable, and that's the great thing about our body, is that it can adapt to anything. But when we don't understand that we're telling our body to store energy, right, it can be very frustrating. And then when we want to go down the reverse, right, it's like, okay, now I'm looking at the mirror, I'm unhappy with the body fat that I've gained. It's like, okay, all right, so I need to cut my calories, I need to move more, right? So now we have a different signal, right? Now we're having food is scarce, and our body is constantly moving. It is moving, and this is where cardio comes into play. People start running more, biking more, whatever it is, and now they're sending a signal that we are doing a lot of burning the calories. So yeah, it will prioritize fat loss, but especially when cardio is the main focus, it doesn't care about any tissue to get better, right? Because whatever we're doing with our body for exercise, our body's hearing that and saying, I need to get better at this situation. So I'll come back to that, where we're trying to talk about the difference between prioritizing fat loss and weight loss. So if people immediately slash their calories with little regard for the quality or the focus of their calorie deficit, they're just eating as little as possible and drastically increasing their activity. Well, now they're telling our body that food isn't abundant, so it's going to tap into the body fat in our system. It's also going to tap into our muscle mass, because we're not eating to support our body, we're eating to tear down tissue, right? So yeah, you'll start losing body fat, but you'll also be losing muscle mass if you go the strategy of slash your calories, drastically increase your exercise, right? Without an emphasis on strength training. We'll get to that in a second. So when that happens, our body now hears the signal that we're telling it food is no longer as abundant as it once was. You're burning a lot more calories. So we're going to tap into all the energy reserves to get better at this activity that you're doing. And to get better, we need less weight on our body, and less weight involves all weight. So body fat will go, so will muscle mass. So this is where people end up losing weight, but then they don't really like the way that they look. They feel like they kind of look the same, because when you start tearing down muscle mass at the same time, you will lose weight, but you will be a smaller, fatter version of yourself, because your body fat percentage will just be higher, right? Without muscle mass with less muscle mass on your frame, even though your body fat percentage will go down, or your body fat will go down, your percentage could go higher, because you don't have the contrasting energy storage system on your frame, because of what you're telling your body to do. So you could lose weight, you could lose the 20 pounds, but you could still not like what you see. You could still see a lot of the same stuff, because you told your body to just get rid of everything, get rid of as much as you can. So even if there is some improvement in your body composition, you may still not like what you see, right? Because you prioritize fat loss and muscle loss, because you didn't tell your body what it was important. You just said nothing's important, weight loss is important, right? And if we want to, and again, this all is dependent on the person, right? If you are, 100 pounds overweight, 50 pounds overweight, body recomposition changes could be like on the back burner. It's like, first focus on getting the weight off, then worry about body recomposition. But it depends on the person, right? So a lot of people want to shed fat, tone up, right? And their method to doing that is lots of cardio, don't eat as much, and that's the philosophy. And again, this is what it could lead. You could lose the weight, but now you have a stimulus that you have to upkeep, and with less muscle mass on your frame, you will have a lower metabolic rate, meaning it can be very much easier for you to regain the weight that you lost, because your body no longer works as hard as it used to when it did have the amount of muscle. Because for every pound of muscle on your frame, we have an additional added calorie burn, because muscle tissue is a active tissue. This is why I mentioned earlier that if we're not eating to support our body, it's just going to prioritize everything, right? So muscle is expensive. You have to eat more than you think you do to see those improvements. But I'm going down a rabbit hole without finishing my thought. So anyway, when you get to the point where you have a lower metabolic rate, because your body focused on you doing more of the exercise, hearing that what you told it, food is scarce, you're going to be super active to lose the weight. This is where people will go through the regaining problem of, now they get to a point where they're happy, but how we lose the weight is how we have to keep it off. All right. If we do a temporary change, right, to expect to go back to normal, quote unquote, well, your normal will go back to where you were before you lost the weight. And now it's much easier to get back there because you have less muscle mass on your frame, so your body doesn't work nearly as hard. So when you stop doing the excessive cardio, because eventually that may be unsustainable due to schedule, due to injury, due to whatever gets in the way of us staying consistent, or you just hate it, now it's much easier for you to regain the weight, because your body heard the signal that you told it that muscle is not an important resource. And this is what we want to avoid, right? Fat loss and weight loss don't have to be the same thing. And when we're trying to focus primarily on fat loss, we need to focus on muscle retention. And this is what leads to body composition improvements that we will enjoy to see, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that need to go into strength training to fully understand how to sculpt a body that you will be very happy about. And a lot of people don't understand that, going through like a weight loss phase, a lot of times you may not be at the physique that you think you want to be. That doesn't mean you failed. There may be just times, a couple more cycles of certain periods. I do not mean cycles as in PEDs, but cycles or periods of time where you focus more on maintenance instead of a deficit, to help support your body for muscle stimulation and muscle growth. And that will lead to more improvements than always just focusing on losing as fast and as much as possible. So what we want to do, instead of telling our body that all resources on our frame aren't important, is we want to help our body understand that it is supported, it is safe to start to retain an expensive tissue. And a muscle is expensive. Like I said, it's not free to burn calories just at rest, right? If we want our body to hold on to muscle, it needs to know that, one, the stimulus of muscle is necessary, needs to be consistent. So this is where strength training or resistance training comes into play. The stimulus that, hey, muscle is important, we need to get stronger. So if we're getting stronger, more muscle is needed, right? And it's very difficult to gain a lot of mass really quickly. So for those of you fearful of getting bulky, it's really hard to do that. So you will not get bulky. For those of you who want to get bulky, it's a lot of work. But again, not this time for the episode. That's for a different episode. You know what? Part 2 is going to be the cycle of bulking, and intentionally changing your body composition. But anyway, our focus here is, okay, we want to send the signal that a muscle is an important resource, that it is needed. So once it has the stimulus of resistance training, if you consistently picking up weights to some capacity, right, our body's going to say, okay, we're going from a state where we didn't need strength to operate in our day-to-day. So now it's getting that signal, right? Because we're not focusing on cardio. Cardio does not tell your body that it needs to get stronger. Even though people, there's certain people who can look very lean that are like avid runners. There's a lot of people who don't see very positive body composition improvements with running because they don't have very much muscle on their frame in general. So when, they lose a lot of weight, they don't oftentimes they could not like what they see because they didn't actually tell their body that the thing that is going to help their composition is important. So we need that stimulus first, right? Just to tell your body, before we get to programming any of that stuff, like, you just need to tell your body that resistance training is going to be normal, right? Because now your body's hearing a loud signal when we tell it to eat, that when we're trying to support a calorie deficit, that's not just eat as little as possible to lose as much weight as possible. It hears that, oh, a certain fuel source needs to be the priority in this process. We need to focus on one energy breakdown and not both energy breakdowns, because this is what really allows us to focus on shedding body fat and improving body composition. Toning is what a lot of people like to call it, right? But just improving your body fat percentage, reducing your body fat percentage, this is what the focus is. So we focus on strength training or resistance training. The signal, the stimulus is, hey, muscle is an important resource. This is something that we do not want to break down, even if calories become less. Now, that, the frequency, as long as you're training 2 to 3 times once, but most muscle groups at least twice a week. So full body 1 to 3 times a week is enough, right? Where a lot of people think they have to train every single day. No, like, as long as we're hitting muscle groups at least twice a week, you're in a great place. So you also save time when you focus on this. And even though it may not feel like you're doing as much as you would be if you had a cardio focus training style, right? This is what leads to lasting change that's much more manageable to stick with, right? Because that's all you need is to hit those muscle groups at least a couple times a week. And intensity, we'll get to that later. But once you have that stipulation or that signaling, now we start understanding, okay, food, right? The only way to lose weight, right? Like I was saying earlier, the only way to gain weight is to be in a calorie surplus, and telling our body, we tell our body where that energy goes, right? Now we're telling our body how to utilize its energy systems with the strength training. So now when we're trying to elicit a deficit, it's not a race to the bottom like most people are used to, because this is what leads to weight loss, right? But it's not just body fat loss, it's also muscle loss. And this is where body composition does not go the way we want to. We want to focus on fat loss. So maybe you don't see as much changes on the scale, right? But you notice clothes fit better, you get stronger, your body composition improves, and the scale doesn't have as much of an impact, right? Like I was saying earlier, our brain easier remembers and quantifies a number rather than what we want to feel. We want to feel confident in our skin. We want to fit back in our clothes, right? We want to let go of the excess energy that is no longer needed. It's not necessary for us to hold on to it. That's what's making it hard for our body to look toned or defined, or whatever the word you want to use to describe it. So now, instead of a race to the bottom with our calories, we want to learn how much we can eat to lose weight, right? And this is where we focus, and primarily focus on protein intake, right? Because now, a bit of a crash course, fats and carbs, not bad, right? People think carbs are bad, sugars, whatever. People thought fats were bad because they're very calorie dense macronutrient, right? Fats make you fat, carbs make you fat. No, anything will make you fat if you overconsume it, right? Carbs are easy to overconsume because they're not very filling and they taste really good, right? Fats are easy to overconsume because they're the most calorie dense macro, right? So for every 1 gram of carbohydrates is 4 calories, for every 1 gram of protein is 4 calories, and for every gram of fat is 9 calories. So if you have 10 grams of each, you're going to have more calories of fat than you would have carbs and protein. This is why people would demonize it, because it's just very easy to overconsume. However, those two things are essential forms of fuel for our body. Fatty acids and carbohydrates get broken down into ATP in our system. ATP is just your body's primary use of energy. So now we need to understand what protein is. Carbs and fats are non-essential macros, meaning that whatever we give our body, it will break down and turn it into whatever it thinks it needs. So if you primarily eat fats, it will be able to eventually break down some of those fats and turn them into glucose and ATP, and vice versa. If you primarily eat carbohydrates, even though it will not be efficient, somehow it will be able to extrapolate some sort of fatty acids. With protein, however, it is an essential amino. It's an essential nutrient, meaning we can't produce it. We cannot create the amino acids necessary with anything else other than amino acids. So if we don't have those in our system, we don't have enough building blocks to actually see the body composition goals that we want, right? This is why protein is so important, because if we don't hit a certain threshold of protein, right, muscle does not become the focus. It's still tear down all tissue, right? Even though, you could be trying to eat more protein, but the protein source that you're choosing can be higher in fat. So now your protein is not nearly as high as you think it is, which could be why you're over consuming calories. You're not seeing the composition changes that you would like to see. So we want to focus on getting our protein to a level that says, hey, there is an abundance of amino acids that helps us with the building blocks from all the exercise that we're doing, right? We're telling our body that strength is important, right? So muscle is needed, and more muscle is needed to get better, right? But if we don't have the building blocks, it's like, giving the blueprints to build a house to a construction crew, but then you don't give them any of the wood or the cement or anything, right? You just give them the blueprints and say build, and they have nothing to build with. And that's what protein is. It's these building blocks, right? So if we want to not only improve body composition, prioritize fat loss, and eventually lose weight without, going through the rabbit hole of not seeing body composition results that we want to make sure that these building blocks are a staple in our day-to-day. And everyone is a bit different, but the minimum amount necessary for each person, this is more of a technical episode, I should say, because I don't really do much of this. It's more psychological, but it came up in one of my coaching calls today. But I don't mean to go over your head, but there's a certain, I say that because I don't want to give you like a bunch of sciencey terms that you have to like memorize. You don't, right? I want you to know that everyone has a certain threshold of protein needed to tell your body that fat loss is a priority. That we want to see body composition improvements to continue to get stronger to adapt to that stress. And this is where your results start to really, really stick. Because once you build muscle, or at least retain muscle, and you support it consistently with your diet and your exercise, it's very hard to lose it. Whereas cardio and super low calorie diets, if you stop doing it for even a week, you will feel the effects almost immediately and feel like you're starting over. Muscle is a completely different relationship with this, right? So that threshold for each individual is about 50. Well, this depends on your size. I can't remember that off the top of my head. But if you take your body weight, divide it in half, I think that's the threshold amount. Oh my goodness, I had this written down and I can't find my sticky note. I'll give you an example. So I'll give you my example. So I am 6'2", 205 pounds. I'm not a small person, but my protein synthesis threshold, my protein threshold is going to be different from one of my clients who is 5'2" and 135 pounds, right? So to give enough protein to my body, I remember, it's 1 gram per kilo that you weigh, right? 1 gram per kilo is around the protein threshold amount. So again, being 6'2", 205 pounds, kilos is roughly, 2.2 pounds per kilo. So we're just going to make the math easy. About 100 grams of protein for me is what is necessary, my threshold to say, hey, there's enough amino acids in my system that muscle is an important resource, right? So whatever your weight would be in kilos, just take your weight divided by 2.2. That would give you your minimum amount of protein necessary to start telling your body that, again, the amino acids that we can't produce unless we consume them are important. So muscle is now a very, very important resource because now we're consuming the minimum amount for us, right? Going higher than that only reinforces that signal that muscle is an important resource even more. So this is where continued improved results can come, right? A lot of people say eat 1 gram per pound of body weight that you would like, and that could be a helpful thing. But if you if you have a lot of weight to lose, that is a lot of protein. So usually when we're thinking of improving body composition, prioritizing fat loss, we want to aim for a general rule of thumb. This is just to give you the building blocks here, is about 1 gram per pound of ideal weight to start off. That's like, so when we have like our threshold number that we understand, like that's our floor essentially. We don't want to get less than that. And when we're trying to get to an ideal, when we're consistent with our training, consistent with our protein intake, we want to be well above our floor and right around our grams per pound of ideal weight, to really, really hone in that fat loss is the priority here, right? Because because again, you're giving your body enough food to support those tissues, and then taking the fat the body fat that's been told that is necessary for storage, right? When you go into a deficit, and this is your focus of calories and macros, then you telling your system that, hey, you start to get to a deficit, you're not so drastic with it. Your muscle retention stays there. So sometimes you can go through body recomposition where you're not losing much weight, but your body is losing fat. So as it kind of progresses and starts to continue to hear that consistent, right? And consistency matters above all else here, that consistent signal over and over and over again, right? Fat loss, our body's going to start tapping in like, okay, the resource that is important is no longer body fat. It is now muscle. And because we're eating protein consistently, we're trying to elicit a deficit without being super drastic, right? About 200 to 500 calories below your maintenance, right? With enough protein to support it. You may not see much change, a lot of change on the scale to begin with, but because you're not losing muscle at the same time, right? But you will start fitting better in your clothes. And if that's the case, or you'll start losing inches, if that's the case, you are in a deficit. And all you have to do is keep going, right? But this is where you start to see that you don't need to lose weight to lose body fat. And in fact, if we only focus on weight as an indicator of our success or our failure, we will miss out on all the other things that tell us we're going in the right direction, but we just weren't aware of it. So now I'm going to bring it back to psychological, right? We think that a number is going to fix our problem. But this is why, like, when I'm talking to someone, I expand. I want them to tell me why. What's going to be different when they have a certain number on the scale? Well, they'll fit better in their clothes. They'll feel more confident, right? They'll have more energy. They won't have to buy new clothes, or they can get rid of all the ones they bought since they've gained the weight, right? It's a lot about how we feel in our body, right? And how certain things feel. Right? That's a better indicator of progress than just a number on the scale. The number is still important because it tells us, are we eliciting a deficit if we're losing weight, if we're staying the same, if we're gaining weight? Because that's what using a scale is actually there to tell us, is to help us understand with the changes that we made, are we going in the right direction? And even if the scale isn't going in the right direction, and we have those other things like you're fitting better in your clothes, you're getting stronger in the gym, then we know that you're building muscle and you're losing body fat. Right. And this is what really changes the perspective. And this really came to when I was talking to one of my clients. She sent me an awesome message about where she was about 4 years ago, and where she is now. And she's been working with me for about 6 months, and she really started, with the transformation challenge a little over a year ago. And she is down, I think, a total of 25 pounds, something like that. And it's really cool to just see where she came from, because when she looked at a photo from herself in 2019, she currently is 10 pounds heavier than she was then, today, after being after losing 25 pounds. But the photo, she has much more muscle mass. She's much more, and she fits way better in the clothes that she's wearing in her new photo, even though she's 10 pounds heavier. And this is what and I might just ask her if I can show it. But you know who you are, and if you're listening to this, you're amazing. But you're right. You kind of sparked this message, or this podcast. But anyway, this was a perfect show of what fat loss and weight loss actually means, right? Or the differences. You don't need to see a number on the scale, right? Yeah, my client, she's super successful, right, with the weight loss, but it's not the number that we're celebrating. It's how we can feel. Right. It's how confident we can feel without a number. The number we attach to because it's a biological response that our brain likes to quantify. But when we understand what is actually necessary, what we actually want to feel, then it makes it, one, easier to sustain, two, much more manageable for the long. Oh, I guess those are the same thing. But yeah, easier to sustain, and you feel better quicker. Right? Instead of chasing a number on the scale and then it doesn't actually solve your problem, and then you're much more likely to either regain the weight, if not more, because you did a lot of things that weren't sustainable, that didn't actually support your body or your goals. And that's why I wanted to give you this podcast, so you start understanding that we don't just want fat loss, or I'm sorry, we don't just want weight loss. We want fat loss. And weight loss can come with that, but we don't need to just lose weight to look better. We can look better first, and then the scale can start going down at a much more steady pace because we have much more manageable things that are easier to keep up with our day to day, right? If you don't feel like you have to work out and do cardio every single day, and all you have to do is work out 2 to 3 times a week, right? And just stay active, more active throughout the day. I did an episode about this, like just getting about between 7 and 10,000 steps, right, on a regular basis. I say just, but if you're like getting 3,000, don't think you have to jump up there, right? Work your way up. But those things are going to be much more impactful than you working out for an hour every single day, super cardio intensive, sometimes multiple times a day, eating as little as possible, telling your body that all resources aren't important. So it's going to tear down everything so that you don't look better, you feel worse, and it's much easier for you to lose your progress because you're not doing things that are manageable. You're doing things that are extreme and drastic, and that sucks. We don't want that. We want to do something that tells our body specifically what we want it to do, because we have the ability to do that. Just because we aren't aware of what we're telling it, or we weren't aware of it, of what we were telling it before, doesn't mean we're doomed, right? It takes some time to shift that perspective to remember, or to give ourselves the ability to be confident that we have the ability to make the change. It just takes a little bit of adjusting, a little bit of understanding, so that we can take those tools and implement the necessary steps to get to where we want to go, right? So, yeah, I hope this is helpful. Is there anything else I want to say? No. The only thing I want to say is thank you so much for listening, as always. If you found this helpful, if you learned something, or if I was able to help you shift your perspective, even in a small way, I really greatly appreciate it if you share this episode with at least one person. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of exceptions to certain things, like certain consistency issues that need to be addressed first. On paper, this sounds easy, but everybody's still an individual that has their own obstacles, right? So, I want this to sound easy, but I also want you to know if you're struggling, it's not like a bad thing. You're not doing anything wrong. We just need more understanding. We need more clarity, and we need more reminders to get us to where we want to go. So like I said, if this is helpful, or if you think someone else will find this helpful, please share the show with them. And if you want more of my content or some free resources from the Transformation Project, all that's linked in the show notes down below. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got for you. I'm done talking before I go for another 45 minutes. So thank you so much for spending time with me, and I'll see you on the next one.